Okay, let's do this. So whenever we start to do perspective, like especially 1 point perspective, the kids always want to do train tracks disappearing off into the distance because I guess, you did this in, I don't know, fifth grade or something like that, right? But so we're going to do train tracks, right? Cool. But we're going to do them a lot more advanced than what you probably did back in third grade or fifth grade or something like that. Because mostly what we're interested in here is not just that it disappears to the vanishing point. We already know that. But here's what's more, is that we can space these railroad ties in a very precise way. We can do that with perspective. These fence posts, these can be placed in a very precise way, right? These cactuses, now they're not in line the same way that the train tracks or the fence posts are, but still they are placed in a very precise way as far as their height goes and stuff like that. Also, we can get our shadows. Of course, they also line up with the vanishing point. And even our little UFOs up here, they are precisely the right size as to where they are, as far as how far they are away from you. Okay, so we're going to cover all that stuff, well, right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and since I've worked out everything here, I'm going to put paper right on top of there, right? So I don't have to work it all out. But just like, I would if I was drawing it totally from scratch, I'd have to figure out, well, about where would I have my vanishing or my horizon line, excuse me. So right about there, right about the middle, the paper will be fine. And where am I going to put my train tracks? Like how wide they're going to be? Well, I don't know. Maybe about there would be good. And so train tracks have a little bit of volume to them. And let's see, whereabouts would I have like my, maybe something like this here. My railroad ties, where would those go? That kind of thing. Okay. And let's see, I'm going to have a cactus in here. So, how high am I going to make this cactus? Maybe something like this right here. Okay, that'll be my first cactus and how kind of tall it is. And fence posts, maybe get a fence post in right about here-ish. That'll be my first fence post. My UFO, I'll draw the UFO right about here, maybe. That's where my UFO is going to be. And that's about it for now. That's all I'm going to take off of this drawing because I can figure everything else out on my own. Like I say, I just did that because, I've already worked out my sizes on this one. Okay, cool. So let's do it for realsies. So now, as I was saying, obviously I've got my horizon line, drawing very lightly. I've got my train tracks. So now I'm going to take and just sort of, straighten things up a little bit. Say like, oh, okay, maybe, okay, sure, right about there. And, I'm going to have sort of like how wide the actual tracks are. And so just, maybe about there and over here, right? And maybe right over here. Cool. And the tracks are going to have some depth to them too, aren't they? So I'm going to actually draw in for that, account for having a little bit of depth. So right about there. And a little bit of depth on this side. In other words, you're going to see this side of the train tracks because, train tracks stick up a little bit. So a little bit of that too. Okay, everything back to the vanishing point. Easy enough. Okay, so now I was saying that with these railroad ties, I was going to space them, and there was a way of spacing them very precisely. So what I'll do is I'm going to draw kind of like my first one, say like, okay, we'll see the beginning of a railroad tie right there. And then where am I going to have my next railroad tied? Well, I'll have it right about, let's say, here. And what I'll do for this drawing is I'm just going to make the railroad ties and the spaces between the ties be equal, because that'll just be the easiest thing to do. Okay, so the next thing that I need to do is I need to find the center of this, right? Well, I've got this ruler right here, so I'll just go right down here to the bottom. I've got the corner, I've got the other side right here to make a little bit of a mark. Like I say, I actually like paper rulers better because you can do stuff like this, right? Here it is. I'm going to just fold this one in half, See how I just fold that in half? And boom, that's my halfway point. So I know I'll just go back here now and say like, okay, there it is. So I'm going to line this up with the vanishing point, and there it is. So now I've got a line down the center. Okay, what am I going to do with that? Well, so I've got the one line here. That's the one railroad tie maybe that is going off the page. Here's the space. They're going to be equal. So I'm going to line up the corner of this line right here with the center right here and draw it through to over here. So watch. Got that? Line this up, right from the corner to the center. Okay, draw a little bit of a guideline. And there it is. So I know that that is where my next one would go. So I'll go ahead and draw, trying to keep things pretty parallel, a little line right there. Okay. And so then my next one is just going to be the same thing. I'll just take this corner, line it up with this right here, and draw to the edge. Okay. So just like so. I'm going to draw intentionally a little bit darker so you can really see it. So it's right there, right? So here, let me darken these up a little bit so you can really see them. So here was my first one. Okay, here was my second one. This was arbitrary. This, I just made that distance up. But then I went from my first one to the middle, and that's how I got where the next one would go. And that is even spacing. So nice and dark so you can see that. So then, okay, so that's where the next one is, right? That's where it went to. So I can just make my parallel here again. Okay, and go from this point here to the middle, and then just beyond. So here to the middle and beyond. And you see, that's where my next one is. And I just keep going like that all the way down. So here, I'll do it a little bit quick without talking. Of course, what I could do, is instead of making all these lines, I could just say like, okay, I know this one's here, and it's lined up with that one. If I just put a dot right there or just leave my pencil there, I know that that was just right. Right? Then on to the next one. I can just line this up with this and go on. See? Right there. I'll just leave my pencil there. I know that's where it goes. And I can make the next one. See, that way I don't have a bunch of silly lines that I have to keep erasing and erasing and erasing, right? Here to here. I know it's going to line up here, and so forth and so on. So pretty soon you'll see that, well, but these are getting so skinny. What are you going to do once they get skinnier and skinnier and skinnier? Well, then they really kind of just become a texture, don't they? So at a certain point, I'll just make a bunch of lines, right? Because they're just going to get so small we can't tell one thing from another. And off into the distance there. And we don't care. It'll work out, especially once we get all the shading in. Okay, cool. So here, let's clean this up a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and erase all those lines that I really didn't even need to make in the first place, as you saw later on. But that's the way that they go. Okay, and so then I'll just take and I'm going to darken one of these, and this will be where one of my railroad ties is. I'll darken up, I'll skip one, and that's where another railroad tie will be. And the next one, skipping one. And hopefully that makes it kind of clear for you. And you can see where, yes, back in the distance, it's just gonna become kind of a blur. Okay, so that was my railroad ties there. I bet they didn't teach you that in 3rd grade. Okay, so that was simple, right? Obviously, I could do the same thing for my little fence post over here. So if I've got my fence post, all right, and I'm going to determine that that's going to go off to the distance as well. So I can just go to the bottom here. All right, there it is. And then to the top right over here. Okay. And then I'm going to decide where my next fence post is. So let's say, I don't know, right here. Totally arbitrary. Totally arbitrary. So that's where my next one's going to be, right? Okay. I can find the center. Now I could measure. Okay. Actually, you know what? I might as well use it because there it is. Of course, I could just draw an X, finding the center that way. Right? We've done that before, so there's my center there. Anyways, and then just draw that back, just like before. Okay. And so then I'd go from here, right? That's the top of the one, down to the middle. Remember when I went from here to the middle and then beyond. So here to the middle and then beyond. Let's see where it goes. Right? So right there, and there's my next post. Okay. And so I just keep that pattern up. So from the top here to the middle and beyond. So forth and so on. And eventually the same thing will happen with these ones, where it will just sort of disappear into a pattern off in the distance. And just like with the other ones, I don't actually have to draw that line. And after all, that's what my ruler's for. And I'll just fake it from that point on out. Okay. Cool. So now I've got my fence posts, or at least where they're going to be. Now, the thing is with these fence posts, I want these to be kind of like, kind of rickety, old, broken down things. So basically, I got the base of the post figured out. They're all evenly spaced because whenever they put these things in the first place, they were probably even, right? But maybe with these ones, this one's leaned a little bit, and maybe this one's leaned, I don't know, the other way a little bit. Right, and this one's leaning a little bit. This one's just a little bit this way. They're just all a little bit goofy. They've seen better days. There you go, just like me. Seen better days. We're all getting a little bit bent in our old age. Okay, so there it is. And so I've got my fence post, right? I'm gonna just clean that up a little bit. Get rid of all those guidelines. I don't need those anymore. All right, good enough for now. Okay, so now, right, well, that was easy enough because everything was in a straight line. Well, what if you have things that aren't in a straight line? We can still use the same practice to space things, right? So check this out. So if I have, let's say, this cactus over here, right? Let's put this more in the center for you guys to see. And I'll draw it a little bit darker so you guys can see it. Cool, so there's my little cactus. All right, there it is. Okay, and so if I was to have a line of cactuses, I could, and if they were all, let's assume they're all the same height, right? I could go from the bottom to the vanishing point, and then from the top once again to the vanishing point. And obviously, somewhere in the distance, I could make another cactus, making it skinnier, right? Of course, because it's further away from you, right? And so here's my other little cactus over here, and there it is. Okay. And you could see it proportionally, it got smaller like everything else as it went away. Okay, but wait a minute, Mr. Kuhn, you said I don't have to put these in line. Well, of course you don't, right? So if I have this one over here, I could have another one sitting somewhere, let's say next to it, and it would be the same size. So here, let's keep this really simple. So if I had the bottom of this one, that's where it's at, right? If I were to just draw a parallel line or a horizontal line, I should say horizontal, right? Straight on over, and a horizontal line over this way, wouldn't the next one be the exact same height? Right? So I could have another one right over here, little goofy little cactus. All right, so there's my other little cactus. See, same height, same distance away, just in a different spot. Okay. Well, let's place a couple more. So let's say I wanted one that was going to be this tall, this far away, but I didn't want it to be in line at all, right? So, okay, well, I've just decided, well, that's where it's going to be. Let's say I'll put it over here somewhere. So, I'm just going to maybe set up a little guideline over here horizontally. And then I could just put my other cactus over here. Right, here's my other little cactus. Whoop. Okay, and so this cactus over here is the same height as it would have been if it was over here, right? Are you getting it yet? Here, I'll do just a couple more. Okay, let's say I've got one that's way far away, way over, this far away over here, right? So, but I don't want it to be in line. That's just silly, right? Okay, so maybe I'll just move it over a little bit, right? I'll just a little horizontal line just to use as a guideline, or heck, I could just use my eyeballs probably. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to be a lot closer than if you had just guessed right from the get-go. And look at, there's another one. Perfectly far away, perfectly the right size, but it doesn't have to be directly in line. Isn't that cool? Okay, so I can just continue. Let's say, I don't know, let's put another one, this size right here. One that's a little bit closer, but we'll put it over here. So once again, I could say, okay, that's how tall it's going to be. That's where it's planted at, right? And so I've got another cactus right here. Right? Just exactly the right height of what it would have been if it had been right here. Right? Same thing. That's assuming that these are all the same height. Well, just like with the fence post, maybe I'd make little adjustments. Maybe, okay, well, this one did grow a little bit taller than the other one. Okay, maybe this one was a little bit shorter than, this one over here. Whatever, right? You can make those little adjustments. The point is that you got things spaced in the right place using that perspective. Okay, hopefully that's clear. All right, so now the final thing were these UFOs right here. Okay, so same thing. I got a little circle right here, right? And I'll just go back to here. Okay, and so I say like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good UFO. So it's a little bit confusing when I see it as a circle, but of course the circle just fits into a square just fine. So I can say like, oh, okay, how about if that was, okay, here's the center right here, and here's my little center line right here. So let's say I wanted another UFO just in line with this one, to be about the same size is this UFO? You know, how fat is that going to be? Well, you know, just like with the train tracks or just like with the fence posts, I've decided like, here's the line that's going to bring that back. Here's the center point of that line, right? Okay, so that's how big the square is, the square that is around the circle, right? So then I can figure like, okay, well, I can go from here, remember that's the center point, right? From here all the way through to the next thing. Here, I should probably get my ruler, huh? Here. Honestly, you don't even have to use a ruler. You know, once you get good at this stuff, like I say, I hardly never use rulers for anything. That's why I don't keep them around. You don't need them. They slow you down. Anyways, just learn to draw a straight line. But, so if this was like totally in line with this, well, that's what size it would be, wouldn't it? Same thing, same thing, same thing. So I'll just move this over. Say like, okay, maybe that's going to be where my UFO is here and here, right? It's going to be disappearing back. Oh, okay, so now that's how sort of deep it was here, right? How about this way? Well, that's easy enough. All I'd have to do is measure this right here. See? And so if this was at the same distance away and it's the same size little oval that's going to make this up, then this distance would be the same anywhere along this line. So I can just put that and that. You see where I measured it, right? And say like, okay, well, there is the little square. That square can then become a circle just by drawing an oval inside of it. So there's my next UFO. You know, and so forth and so on. I could say like, okay, if there was another UFO in line, this time I'll go, here's the center, here's the edge. See how that's going to draw through? And there's nothing magical about this edge. If I went from here, look, it would do the same thing. It would line up in the same place. So, cool. So anyway, so that's how wide that would be. And so, once again, if I were to look at, let's say here, how fat is that? That's that fat. Come on over here. And here I'll put one edge here, one edge here. Hopefully this isn't getting too liney. But you see, there's my square. That square is the same as this square over here. You can just draw a circle in the square. And there's my other UFO. You know, to me, this perspective stuff, it can get confusing. You know, I understand that. I understand, especially as we get more advanced. But isn't that neato? I mean, it's like a puzzle. We can figure out all this stuff. All this stuff. And when we're done doing all this sort of theoretical perspective, we'll go ahead and we'll look at some photographs. Maybe I'll have you take your own photographs and we'll find the vanishing points and we'll find sort of how things work and line up evenly and all that kind of good stuff. Because, hey, there's a reason why they did this 500 years ago and they're still doing it today. Because it works, because it's right. Okay, so now to go from here to here, well, it's just a lot of shading, isn't it, right? And maybe a little bit more detail work. Like, so for instance, you know, the railroad ties, well, they're going to stick out, aren't they? So how far are they going to stick out if you've ever actually been on railroad tracks? Oh, I don't know. Let's say that far. So I'll just draw that back here as a guideline. Okay, and then I can just make my railroad tracks. There's the little ties for the railroad tracks. See? There it is. There it is. That kind of thing, right? And the railroad ties would have some depth, wouldn't they? You know, if you've ever tried to walk on railroad tracks, you know they've got some depth to them. So they are little forms, aren't they? They're just other little tiny cubes, right? Very long, sort of rectangular cubes, but cubes nonetheless, right? They're going to have a form to them, aren't they? Right? Just like that. Okay. Let's line this up so we get them right. And just like I did with the fence post, maybe some of them are in a little bit rickety, right? as long as you've got the spacing worked out, you're going to be looking pretty good. The other thing that I did on this one is, in here I made it so that my ground wasn't perfectly level, right? You can see that it looks as if the railroad tracks are a little bit raised, that there's a little ditch maybe between the railroad track sort of base and the rest of the ground. Okay, well, so I just drew guidelines for that as well. All right, and when I was making my shading, I just shaded it in a little bit, like nice and curved. So you're following the contour lines. Oftentimes when you're making ground or other things, you're following the contour lines, not necessarily outlines, contour lines, right? And just thinking about the values. All right, what else? What else do we need to know on this one? Well, the shadows, and that really helps a lot. So I put a central light right in the middle, right here, right? And so all I did was say like, okay, well that's going to line up with the light. And I didn't make the light, the shadows, excuse me, like super distinct. I just let them get a little bit fuzzy, a little bit fatter as they went away from the light. So here, or with this one over here, your shadow would be over here, right? So I just kind of make a bunch of lines, like here's this one over here. Where would the shadow be? So I'll just line it up with the vanishing point in the bottom. Okay, so that's where my shadow would be for that one. See, back over here to this one, and a lot of it is also just using logic. So if I had my light way down there, then my shadows would be like super long, wouldn't they? Right here, I can see, where's that shadow going to be? Right about there, right? Okay, so forth and so on, little details like how I put in a little bit of barbed wire, whatever, right? The thing is that I'm not going to go over all the process of shading and texture, because I did it in the other videos, didn't I, right? So if there's any confusion about that, go ahead and take a look at the other videos once again, right? And then that's going to teach you it all. Okay, so I think that's about it, and good luck with that. Hopefully you enjoyed doing train tracks, but maybe just slightly more advanced train tracks this time.